Longbows at low tide. Part 1. Return to Otter Island. There is something special about the quest for adventure while carrying a simple longbow. In my past, I had hunted the intertidal areas of southeast Alaska for the coastal brown bear. I had lived on a small, otter-inhabited rock surrounded by salt water where the tide never rests. This particular story is a tale of my 2016 return to Otter Island. Although I have often hunted this location solo, my birthday brother, by another mother, needed to share in this adventure. William Bubba Graves is the kind of man you want at your side when your circumstances collapse around you. I knew from past experience that any close distance interaction between longbowman and brown bear can escalate very quickly. If that happened, I would be fortunate to have Bubba at my side. Our adventure started at the docks of Auk Bay, just north of Juneau. We loaded our gear in an inflatable boat onto the deck of Ben Penny's boat, Toxophilus. Ben and Luke Woodruff would drop Bubba and me off at Otter Island, and then they would continue onward to hunt the ebony coastal black bears at another destination. Spring is a magical time in southeast Alaska. Birds return from their winter refuges, and life awakens from a long winter's silence. The rich marine system electrifies all life on the coast and is the spark of rejuvenation. The intertidal zone between low tide and high tide is uniquely rich in life. The tides ebb and flow twice each and every day, alternately exposing then covering its bounty in a crystalline brine. The tides also nourish the sedges that line the zone immediately above the reach of the highest tide and the adjacent forest. The bears love eating the new fresh sedges of spring. These areas were our focus for locating and stalking the magnificent coastal brown bears of southeast Alaska. Mornings in camp are a leisurely affair, time for reflections of the past and thoughts of our futures. Beach combing at low tide, and early afternoon naps. We always have plenty of time for drinking coffee with our warm meals, which often included pancakes with cut-up Snickers bar chunks that caramelize on the griddle. Every day, mid-afternoon, we headed out on a small inflatable boat to peer into various secluded inlets and back bays, where experience suggested we would find hungry, feeding bears. It was time to go forth. Adventure was calling. It didn't take long before Bubba and I spotted the first bear of the trip. The stalk was on. Well, we can't always get close enough for a shot. If we knew the outcome of the hunt before we left home, why would we even bother to go? You never know when you are going to come across a tasty morsel at low tide. Scrumptious. On every trip to southeast Alaska, I have been treated to a day or two of very low tides, the perfect time for beach combing and the opportunity to see the most interesting sea creatures, such as various species of clams, limpets, sea cucumbers, sponges, chitons, sea anemones, starfish, and sometimes the evidence of human hands and errors. It was all new to Bubba, having been raised 1,000 miles from the sea. Bubba and I glassed a small bay from the shadows. The bones of an unfortunate seal were underfoot. Eventually, a lone bear appeared and the hunt was on. Silently, we boated across the bay and slipped up the wood line towards the feeding bear, but we just couldn't get ahead of the moving bear and remain downwind. Many southeast Alaskan waters host incredibly rich marine life, and it just so happens some of it is actually scrumptious. Dungeness crab can be captured in small pots that can be pulled by hand. A few minutes in some steaming salt water and we have a feast fit for a king. Bubba and I stalked down the shoreline. We come to a collapsed cabin, and I reflected back a handful of years to another hunt. Water had topped my hip boots while I crossed a river to get downwind of two lone bears in the tidal flats. I had worked my way between the bears and the tree line. The larger bear circled, and the smaller bear lost his nerve and raced directly into my lap with the larger bear in hot pursuit, passing 4 very short yards from my nocked arrow. Both bears quickly disappeared into the mist and were gone with the salt breeze. I soon realized I could not safely cross the river to get back to my boat. Rain at the head of the basin had produced so much runoff that caused the river to swell, there was no safe way to cross the river. I spent a cold, wet night shivering in that collapsed cabin, waiting for the 4 a.m. light of day and low tide to safely navigate back to my boat. It was the final evening of the hunt. Bubba and I did a deep loop through the rainforest below down to gain access to the back of a large bay without being winded by any bears feeding in the tidal zone. A sow with a large cub fed between us and a lone bear. If we could slip around the sow and cub undetected, we may earn one final stalk of the trip. Normally, it is best to stalk inside the wood line, but an early spring had provided some cover with extra tall vegetation in the intertidal flat. I circled the lone bear and crawled down a shallow cut that intersected with a ditch that angled in the direction the bear was feeding. I tried to shift my position so that I could draw my bow for a shot, and the bear spooked at the sound of gravel grinding underneath my shifting boots. The bear turned, ran, and then, to my surprise, stopped. Unbelievably, the bear returned and fed within 15 yards of me as I continued to try and shift my body position. I just couldn't get turned far enough to be able to draw my bow undetected as the sun set on another incredible brown bear hunt. Coming soon, Longbows at Low Tide, Part 2, Goodbye to Otter Island. Steve and Bubba make another attempt at arrowing a coastal brown bear during the 2017 spring season